Grandmaster Nightfalls are finally here, which is a heck of a lot sooner than what we normally get it. Again, guys, in the past, Grandmaster Nightfalls would launch week 7 or week 8 of a given season. But Bungie is trying something new this season by launching Grandmasters in week 4. Considering we have no increase in our power levels, there really is no pre-grind in order to be Grandmaster ready, just as long as you are 1800. And your maximum effective power will be locked at 1815. The enemies, however, will be at 1840 power level. And last season, we had some pretty decently tough Grandmasters, specifically Lake of Shadows, which got a rework, turning it to one of the easiest Nightfalls to actually one of the more difficult ones. Today, though, we're going to be going over the best builds to bring into GMs, weapons and armors we recommend using, as well as the rewards, shields, threats, and everything you need to know to be prepared each week. Now, a few important key notes. First up, the Nightfall selection node will not be available today, as in you will not be able to do all the Grandmaster Nightfalls and Guild Your Conqueror title. This will not be active until week 7. Honestly, I don't know why Bungie's still waiting on that, but just know we're only getting a single Grandmaster every single week until week 7. Also this season, we have the new Grandmaster Nightfall, Psyop Battlegrounds. Now, since we have not actually encountered this as a Nightfall, we don't really know what champions we're going to be facing here, or even what the threat's going to be, as well as things like overcharged weapons, etc. But similar to like the Mars Battleground, I'm sure this one's going to be just as challenging, so much so that Bungie actually had to pull back on the difficulty of the Mars Battleground from last season. Now, as for double Nightfall loot, according to blueberries.gg, this should fall on week 8 and week 12. Keep that in mind, guys. Put it on your calendar. It is a fantastic way to top off all resources. And I know we have things like exotic armor focusing, but if you're like me, my RNG has just been so piss poor with it that when it comes to actually farming high stat roll exotics, GMs are still, in my opinion, the best way to do it. Now, before diving into each one of the Grandmasters, I do want to talk about some exotics that are really popping off right now. First up, in Strand Surge environments, Quicksilver Storm is so good. We utilized it last season. Fellas, that grenade launcher mode on this auto rifle puts out. Plus, on top of that, we have anti-barrier auto rifle, so double whammy. Another weapon to consider is Malfeasance. Fellas, Malfeasance got an exotic catalyst. We did damage test on it. Essentially, it has Vorpal, which I know on the surface may not seem much, but on a primary weapon, that's a 20% buff in damage, most notably against champions, but also bosses as well. And keep in mind, when you combine both that explosive shadow perk with Lucky Pants, you get some crazy damage. It also does increased damage against taken enemies. You can of course bypass this if you apply, say, Witherhoard to a target. Bungie's code recognizes that target suddenly as a taken enemy, thus amplifying the damage here of Malfeasance. Now, another weapon to be looking out for is Tommy's Matchbook. The Tommy's Matchbook, I know, it's not necessarily the craziest thing in the game, but it does cause ignitions. And with the right fragment combinations, not only will you be staying alive more, you'll be applying more Scourge and seeing more kabloomies. Keep in mind though, the ignitions from Tommy's Matchbook will not stun unstoppable champions if you have anti-barrier auto rifle on. We also have Leviathan's Breath, which is a clear winner for DPS and for Void Surge environments. It was literally one of our favorite weapons last season, so much so we did a deep dive on it. This season though, Void Surge is still in rotation, and we have so many artifact mods synergizing here. Authorized mods for Void, Unto the Breach, Protective Breach, Supernova. The damage here from Leviathan's Breath, guys, is massive. Unfortunately though, it does not synergize with Oathkeepers. Why, Bungie? Now, the seasonal weapon Centrifuse is also another one to consider. We did a deep dive on that, literally calling it Zala 2.0. And let me just say, guys, when you get its exotic catalyst and you're dipping into that overcharged capacitor and synergizing with Arc 3.0, you've got some crazy blinding capabilities and also crazy damage. We'll throw in a build on this one here, guys, and we're gonna throw builds in down below if you're interested. Feel free to check those out. But there are a lot of things really synergizing with Arc this season as well, and considering it's also a surge that's going to be rotating, this is fantastic. Things like Thunderous Retort, Amped Up, Shock and Awe, as well as Lightning Strikes Twice. And keep in mind, some of our old Arc supers that were originally pretty poopy have come back with a vengeance. Chaos Reach, especially with Jolt. We did damage testing comparing all of our supers in the current season, and I really like where Chaos Reach is at right now. When it comes to like clearing a room out, this super can do it. Outside of that, guys, trace rifles are also available for overload this season. You have a number of different exotic trace rifles that work, but honestly, the Navigator may be a huge play. I'm still personally trying to lock that down, but this is a strand trace rifle, which means it's going to take advantage of strand surge. It also applies sever to enemies and keeps you and your teammates alive. But other than that, guys, there is a number of builds you can choose from, but on to some builds. We're still pretty early on in the season, so fleshing out builds is something we're still working through. But an exotic that has made a huge splash on our team is Cenotaph Mask. This is the perfect pairing for any trace rifle build. This comes with the perk High Priority, where it steadily reloads a portion of your equipped trace rifle's magazine from reserves, and damaging a vehicle, boss, or champion with a trace rifle matching your subclass will mark it as a priority target. And if an ally delivers the final blow to that priority target, heavy ammo spawns for them. Now, we did a lot of testing on this, and turns out if you have a teammate rocking Aeon Gauntlets with Sective Insight, and they go and actually finish that priority target, not only will they get a brick of heavy from Cenotaph, you will get a brick of heavy from Sective Insight and Aeon Gauntlets. And then your third teammate will get 2 bricks of heavy. Fellas, this is like bricks from beyond on crack. Now, even though we weren't necessarily that impressed with Oathkeepers, as it didn't synergize with a lot of our exotic bows, we do have this build right here, which combined both Oathkeepers and Wishender together. And let me just say, guys, it does some meaty damage. Now, in that build video, we recommended a solar subclass, but keep in mind, you can be pretty flexible on that front. Some people like to go invisible more. If you want to rock Void, go right ahead. Now, finally, no backup plans got a buff this season. And this is personally something I'm going to be using in my own Nightfall runs. Legend of Acurus is dishing out some crazy damage. Combine that with no backup plans, you've got a champion shredding shotgun. Granted, it is a shotgun, and it is putting you in harm's way. But if you can survive, Acurus is going to put in work for you, especially in Arc Search environments. Build link to that down below. Now, we have our Pacific Winter build. We've mentioned this a number of times, and I feel like it just didn't get a lot of traction, but this is actually a build revolving around Fellwinter's Helm, as well as the new Pacific Epita Stasis Wave grenade launcher from the dungeon. Now, we're pairing this with our Void subclass, and the build is essentially a spiritual successor to our Fellwinter Smash build that we did before. It has the exotic perk Warlord's End, where power melee final blows creates a burst of energy that weakens nearby targets, with finishers and final blows against more powerful targets, increasing the radius of the burst and the length of that weakening effect. Now, Fellwinter's Helmet, guys, no joke, it's one of the best exotics you can bring for your team. It has a 30% weakening debuff, which is the highest in the game, tying with that of Tractor Cannon, Deadfall Tethers, as well as Mobius. Now, the gameplay loop for this build is very straightforward. Lower enemies' health, perform a finisher on them. This gives double reload to your grenade launcher, which can further prime, weaken, and volatile enemies. Then we just keep using our finisher on more and more enemies. It's a fantastic build. Check it out if you haven't already. Now, keep in mind, you don't have to jump on any of these new builds. We have a number of old builds that are still just as good. If you like rocking Abeyant Leap, Strand, suspending enemies, fantastic. You got things like Osteo Striga. Even though we don't have anything here for SMGs, Osteo is still very, very good. And last season, we actually ended up shelving Gyrfalcon's Hauberk simply because we had volatile flow on our artifact. But this season, it's actually time to bring Gyrfalcons back out. So feel free to check out that Gyrfalcon build of ours. This is our OG Falcon Leech build paired with Collective Obligation, one of the nastiest builds for Night Stalker hunters. Now that we've covered a few builds, we're gonna jump into what this season's Nightfall schedule is. And then we're gonna talk about some loot, as well as the enemy types you need to look out for. Now, our very first Grandmaster Nightfall for this season will be the Lightblade, which will be dropping the heavy grenade launcher Wendigo. We did some damage testing last season with Wendigo, and personally, guys, I would recommend going for one for both PvE and for PvP. Explosive Light, Clown Cartridge, you've got things like Cascade Point if you want to blow your load, but really, that Explosive Light plus auto loading combination is really good. Now, for PvP for your Wendigo, hands down, guys, get an Impulse Amplifier roll. Look, I don't understand why more people are not using grenade launchers inside of PvP, especially in game modes like Comp. There's literally a round where heavy can swing the match if you have the right heavy. Currently right now, and I know there are other heavy weapons you can use, but if you have that Impulse Amplifier grenade launcher roll with preferably proxy grenades, dude, you've got 3 kills pretty much guaranteed in that GL. And you can actually get crazier and combine both rangefinder with Impulse Amplifier and now you're hitting projectile speeds that would make even Mountaintop blush. Now, as far as Lightblade goes, this is a very difficult Nightfall. However, a lot has changed. We've got Strand now, and a number of other things that can take this strike on. We're gonna be actually running this Nightfall over on our Twitch. Please come join us, as we're gonna be trying to optimize it the best way we know how. But back in the day, this strike used to beat the piss out of us. Not saying it's not gonna happen again, but considering how much more powerful we've become, I think we can make pretty quick work of it. Now, other weapons that are gonna be dropping this season, most notably new or quote-unquote new weapons, Braytech Osprey and Loaded Question. I know, right? We've got some throwbacks. Now, Braytech Osprey, this is a high-impact frame rocket launcher, and it's got some interesting trait combinations. First up, Bipod, which has not really been one that I'm that crazy about. Bungie really talked up Bipod. However, even though it does increase rocket launcher ammo and reserves, the 40% damage reduction is quite ass. Other than that, they have things like destabilizing rounds, and you can combine something like destabilizing rounds with cluster bombs, which seems like an interesting combination. You could also do like chain reaction with cluster bombs. And I'm not saying like cluster bombs is meta by no means, but it is a combination I want to try. Lasting Impression is also on this weapon, and the craziest perk I see here is actually Keep Away, which I'm gonna say right now, you don't want to use Keep Away. Again, things that buff accuracy really do not make a difference on a weapon that shoots projectiles, so I would not recommend it. You also have Envious Assassin. We're rapidly defeating targets with other weapons. Before drawing this one, we'll transfer ammo to the magazine from reserves. So a couple options, guys. We're gonna be trying out everything on this weapon, and as soon as we secure a good roll, we'll be comparing that with all the rocket launchers this season, because we have quite a few, and we've been meaning to do a DPS comparison between all of them. Now, Loaded Question. Back in the day, guys, this was one of the best fusions in the game, primarily because it was the only fusion that could roll with Reservoir Burst. Now, it's a high impact. It's back again with Reservoir Burst, but it has combinations like Overflow, which can top you off, making every single shot proc that Reservoir Burst if above the magazine threshold. Now, you also have Controlled Bursts, where landing every shot in a burst grants this weapon increased damage and reduced charge time. Now, this is a 20% increase in damage, and considering that this is a high impact, you have less bolts per shot, meaning landing those shots and proccing Controlled Bursts should be more manageable. Outside of that, you have Envious Assassin, Demolitionist, and even though this fusion rifle is primarily being looked at inside of PvE, considering its pass, inside of PvP though, you may want to consider it, especially that Eye of the Storm under pressure roll. Now, the reason why I mentioned those two together is number one, under pressure is always procced inside of PvP, considering you start off with 2 shots, and even if you do pick up ammo, guys, just make sure you don't reload until you need another shot. That way, under pressure is always being procced. But Eye of the Storm, that perk is going to be so beautiful on this high impact. Considering the charge rate being as long as it is, by the time you're getting ready to blow your load, dude, you're probably going to be almost dead. Just saying. It's high impact. It takes a while. It's a Kamehameha, a long wind up. But when you finally do let it rip, and let it rip you shall, Eye of the Storm will be procced, boosting your accuracy in combination to the accuracy bumps from under pressure. So again, I know this fusion rifle is being looked at primarily for PvE. I believe it may actually have a play inside of PvP. Now, both of those weapons are going to be dropping from the Fallen Saber Nightfall, as well as the Psyops Battlegrounds. So essentially, the Moon Nightfalls. So keep an eye out for those in the coming weeks. Now, on top of those two weapons, we also have the Buzzard, Hung Jury, and the Swarm dropping as rewards from Grandmasters this season. And for my folks that deleted their God Roll Palindrome, may you feel the pain of yet another season with no Pally dropping. Now, moving on, Strand Surge will be active for every week, along with the rotation between Arc and Void Surges. As for this week specifically, you're going to be looking at both Strand and Void Surge combinations. Arc Threat will also be active, which is extremely lethal inside of this Nightfall, considering literally everything does arc damage. As for champions, they're going to be 15, with 12 of them being Barrier, and the last 3 being Unstoppable. And finally, there will be 8 arc shielded enemies and 6 solar. All I can say about this Nightfall, guys, be prepared to move. Again, come by our Twitch. We'll be playing it all day. But in that boss room, do not sit still. If you have a teammate next to you, get the hell away from them. One of you is going to die. If you're on top of each other, you're both going to die. Now, there's been some crazy bugs in the past where you can actually mess with the boss, where when jumping back and up to the platform, he'll get stuck. I'm not sure if that still works now, but we're going to try it. So guys, that is our Grandmaster Nightfall guide for this season, and kind of a calendar shoot for the rest of this season. This is our little calendar here if you want to take a screenshot of this, but it shows you for week 2, week 3, and so on and so forth, when the other Nightfalls are dropping, and the associated weapon with them. We'll be making guides on these every single week, so feel free to come by and check us out. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching, and as always,
Slap that like button like your mama told you right.